With great pleasure, I'd really like to introduce my past colleagues, Jen Buckley and Pam Waterhouse, as they kind of share with us supporting students' language in the classroom. And it was neat as Pam and I started chatting just 5 minutes ago, it was like, you know, should hopefully then all tie into what we're all talking about, you know, supporting all these vision, hearing, and deafblind students. So I'll pass it over to Pam and Jennifer, and at around 25 to 22, we're going to try a Kahoot game, and then lunch should be at about 11:45. So we're going to try to stick as close to that, and then be back for 12:30. Okay, so I'll hand it over to Pam.
Thanks. We're so happy to be here talking to you guys today, and we talk to teachers all the time, and that's kind of my passion, but it's usually like 20 or 30 teachers in a classroom or the library. It's never this big, so I'm nervous and very honored to be here talking to you guys. I'm Pam, and this is my colleague Jen. And we do a lot of Pro-D together. Okay, our topic today is supporting student language in the classroom. And I love so much what your earlier presenter, Shelley Williams, had said about how 90% of our deaf and hard of hearing students are coming to school, you know, with that lack of language, and how important it is to give them language, fill them up with language. It's the language that they're needing that's going to really indicate their success in school. The language that they need to speak, but also language is the backbone of reading and reading comprehension. So you'll see as we progress here the importance of language to school success.
So we're going to pass the mic back and forth during this. So we wanted to start with the layer cake of love, and we have borrowed this from Shelley Moore. She is a wealth of knowledge when it goes into inclusion and including kids in the classroom. If you've never heard of her, check her out. She has some great blogs and videos and great strategies. But she talks about how all children should have a piece of the cake and that every layer is some other support, such as a hearing teacher, an EA, SLP, OT, that rather than children being given one person at a time, they have access to everybody in one slice. And this is Homer. He's backing up to work on oral language. We love this little visual. So we'll go through today. We're going to talk about our donut of oral language, and we're going to go through each ring, giving you guys some strategies, some ideas, how to target these different areas, and how they all work together in the end to hit reading fluency, writing, spelling, and reading comprehension. We're going to go through a lot of information today, and we have a short amount of time. And Pam and I love to talk, so we'll ask if you don't mind holding your questions till afterwards. We'll both be here through the lunch break if you need any clarification. Do you guys use Daily 5 in this district? Okay, great. I've just learned about it last year. So we took the Cafe and Daily 5 model, and if you're working in that Daily 5 model, these are the areas we'll show you where we'll put in all the strategies. So if you're working on comprehension or the teacher is in the class, you could use the oral language strategies we'll tell you about in that comprehension column. And same for accuracy, fluency, and expanding vocabulary.
And I think our theme word today is going to be collaboration. Our goal for these kids is to be in their class, to be accepted, a member of the class, part of the class. How can all of us together as a team collaborate and support these students? We all bring something really unique to the picture in terms of our training. And I've learned already this morning from the other speakers presenting, things I didn't know about, resources I didn't know about, um, learning about the difference between interpreters and your signers. I've already learned so much. And it's like when we're all together working as a team, the kids are getting the benefit of everybody's expertise, and we all bring different experiences and different knowledge to the table. So that's our theme today, is collaboration. And we're trying to tie this in with something we see happening in the classroom all the time. You go into the classroom and the teacher is working on the reading groups. You have the group of kids working or using their iPads, another group of kids maybe doing some pencil writing activities, the teachers at another group doing some reading. And so what we're trying to do is align some oral language with something that's already happening in every classroom every day. So we aren't saying you have to do something totally different. This all falls under the umbrella of literacy and literacy skills, and it's trying to align it so that instead of us taking a child working out in the hallway, it's I know something about language, and let me show you what I can bring to the table, what we can do in the classroom, and this is going to be beneficial for all the kids in the class, not just my one student or your one student. All the kids get the benefit. Okay, so the first ring of the donut was phonetics, which are speech sounds. And so we know that a lot of our kids have difficulty with articulation, with hearing speech sounds, with producing speech sounds. And so our takeaway today is that under the umbrella of literacy skills is that speech sound awareness, knowing phonetics, knowing sounds, hearing the difference between sounds, and some of our kids need to work at that level. And so we want to work on sounds right from their first day of preschool or kindergarten or grade 1. We don't want to wait until they're in grade 4 or 5, and let's wait and see if they grow out of it, because it's just best practice to help kids as soon as possible. Oh, is that different? Okay. And some strategies came in on the bottom there. So I'm looking, why is this slide the same? So some strategies are working on articulation in the classroom, and that's a professional development activity that I do for teachers, teaching them about working on articulation with all the kids in the classroom. And then the SMILE, Structured Methods in Language Education, is another great one for working on phonetics. And it's a beautiful multisensory kit aimed at teaching our hard of hearing students to speak and read and write. But it's also found to be wonderful with our young nonverbal kids with autism. And I've also had 2 kindergarten kids with Down syndrome come to kindergarten, and they have used it for their preschool articulation program. And they've come to school with beautiful articulation, and they could read. And none of the other kids in their kindergarten class could. So I can't say enough good things about the SMILE program. So when we look at our daily 5, our cafe model in the classroom, if you want to work on reading literacy accuracy, this is where you could work on the SMILE or the articulation piece. And this is just a video. We'll show you a little bit of it. And this is a classroom teacher who works on articulation in her classroom.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. My friends, may I please have Maxine, Jess Karn, and Gal sure it's stuck in there. And remember, when we make the S sound, we don't say S. We just say S. Go ahead. Good. Okay, I see that Maxime is ready. His hands are on his head. All right, go ahead, Galvin. We're all going to listen to you. Look at Galvin. Nice job. Nice and loud, Maxime. Let's hear you. Good. And Jasparin? Good job. Please flip over your cards, and I want you to practice your words. You might not get through them all, and then I'm going to ask you to pick 3. Okay, so go ahead, practice them.
Sandbox, 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 seal, sandbox,
There you go. Good job. Good job. Okay, Galvin, we're going to start with you. You get to pick one. You're going to read it, and then we're going to go to Maxine, and you get to pick a different one, whatever one you want, and you read it, or it can be the same. I don't.
I just wanted to show you that as a little example of a teacher working on speech sounds with her students. And so what she does is in September, just look at the kids. And she has a lot of ESL students, and they don't pronounce the TH sound. So that first week of school, come on over in the group, let's practice the TH sound. The kids that make that S sound with their tongue sticking out, come on over here, let's practice that S sound. And because she's with them 5 days a week, and she's correcting them constantly at circle time and throughout the day, these kids make phenomenal progress. And when I had said to her, oh, can I come in? This was last year, and it was kind of around early November, and take a video of you working on the TH sound, she said, we're done. Every kid in the class has it now, including the ESL students that had never been exposed to that sound before because it doesn't occur in their languages they speak at home. And she says, I do this because now I'm going to teach these kids to the phonics. Here's the letters, here are the sounds it makes, and now they hear the sounds. And my teaching is so much more efficient, and my kids do so well because now they are aware of the differences between the S sound with your tongue sticking out and the S sound with your teeth closed. Hearing the difference between the L sound and the W sound. Hearing the difference between maybe a P sound and a B sound, because a lot of different languages don't differentiate in voicing as much as English does. So her thing is, I just work on it. The first few weeks of school, now all the kids are kind of fixed, and if they aren't fixed, she can refer them to the speech pathologist for some assistance. But so many of the kids, it's developmental, and they need that extra listening practice. And so we often think if we're going to work on speech sounds, we need to pull them out into that nice quiet room and work with them there. But what happens is they never generalize that back into the classroom. So yes, pull them out. Yes, work on that auditory perceptual piece. And as soon as they can pronounce it, generalize it back into the classroom. Get it going in the room of the building where they need it the most. And the other thing is there's half a dozen other kids that also need to work on that sound so that this isn't an isolated child feeling like, oh, I have to go out. I'm not as good as the other kids. There's something wrong. Yeah, all the kids are unique, and all the kids have challenges, and all the kids are good at some stuff. And that's our whole inclusion model, is valuing diversity, knowing what you're good at, knowing what you're not good at. But hey, these other kids aren't good at that either. We're all at the same level and we're all practicing together. And so it's just part of that inclusivity model.
I like the video that Pam shows, and usually she shows a bit of a longer one, and there's a sword fight that breaks out in the classroom, and how the teacher has to go deal with that. But the kids continue practicing. It's a really great example of everyday classrooms and the chaos that ensues. So the next part of the ring is phonology, and just by reading the slide there, you can see how the importance of kids being able to pronounce those sounds, how that first ring in phonetics is going to affect this next ring. Rhyming is usually said to be one of the easiest things. It's the first things that kids pick up. Typically, developing students pick it up naturally, but a lot of the students we see need a lot of extra support in that. It's a foundational skill for literacy. Phonology has to do with those sounds and letters, and phonemic awareness falls within this umbrella, so that's a big term in districts right now. So if you're thinking phonemic awareness, that's part of this as well. The one program that we always like to use for some of those in-class small groups to give kids a bit more practice is the intensive phonological awareness program. My favorite part about it, not only that it's evidence-based, when we're working on that first skill, rhyming, we're not just working on the listening skills, we're teaching kids to feel what their tongue and mouth is doing for the sounds that they're making. So that's a really powerful way for kids to figure out what's going on, what sounds they're hearing, what they're actually saying. And it's evidence-based. So that would also fall in this model and working towards literacy under the accuracy model. So if the teacher's working with kids or there's groups going on and they're wondering what you're targeting by using this program, you're targeting the curriculum through the accuracy.
Okay, and our next ring of Homer's donut is morphology. And morphology is great. There's tons of research around morphology right now and what an important role it plays in reading and reading comprehension. And so the important thing about morphology is it helps build vocabulary and vocabulary comprehension. Because once you understand prefixes and suffixes and the meaning behind them, it just really, really increases kids' ability to understand what they're reading. Plus, they sound better when they're talking. And some strategies for morphology. Morphological awareness activities. There's none in particular that I recommend, but I go into classes and see them all the time. Tons of stuff if you Google it, tons of stuff on Pinterest. The structured word inquiry approach, where you might show a student a word like helpless or unhelpful and say, what's the root word? What's the prefix? What's the suffix? How does that change the meaning of the word help? And so just showing kids to look for the root word and knowing what the suffixes mean is phenomenal in terms of helping their comprehension. With the younger students, you just start with our most common grammatical endings. And then here's some examples that I think I looked at Pinterest, found some things. There's tons of stuff out there, but they're great. And then when you look at our cafe model, when you're working on morphological awareness activities, look how you're working on comprehension. Look how you're working on accuracy. Look how you're working on fluency. Look how you're expanding their vocabulary. So if you're working on morphology and morphological awareness, look at the bang for your buck that you're getting. Like, that is so awesome. Okay, you might have to read this one for yourself. Our next ring of the donut is syntax, which is sentence structure.
So yeah, we'll give you guys a minute to read that. Use your decoding skills. You got it. All right, so now we're going to ask for participation from the audience, and I know how you feel. I always hate participating in a large group. Anybody willing to guess who is the story about? I'm hearing quiet answers. All right, so I did hear it. Flingeldobe and Pribben are the characters in the story. I have to wait so I can read the next question. Who wants to answer where were they? Any guesses? Oh, where were they? Where were Flingeldobe and Pribben? In the Nerdlink. Excellent. What were they doing in the Nerdlink? Right, treppering gloopy capels and cleaning burly greps. And what did Pribben do? He glaped and glaped. So this obviously doesn't make sense. The word treppering, gloopy, capels, those don't exist in the English language. You can read this because of your knowledge of syntax. So if we teach kids that knowledge, it helps them understand whatever they're reading. They know that after a noun, Flingeldobe and Pribben, there's going to come an action and a location. Do you want to say more on that? So one thing we like to use for syntax, for comprehending the sentence structure, is the program Colorful Semantics. This comes out of the UK. And it attaches color to word meaning. It's also really powerful for kids that have reduced sentence length if they're only speaking in one word. We teach them to describe a picture or a scene using 3 to 4 words. And it continues after the where, excuse me, you have different colors for adverbs, conjunctions, and it can get really complex for those older students and the more language that they need to use.
Okay, and another strategy is we all work on WH questions, right? How many IEPs don't have that goal? But our rationale for doing it is that we're teaching them a new sentence structure. My example here is why is he, why is she? And so we're teaching kids how to answer it. He is climbing the ladder because he is wearing sunglasses because. So you notice we're going from why is he to he is, that interrogative reversal. Our goal here is mastery. We work on these over and over and over again, first orally, and then we begin writing the answers. And when you think about school, we often start with writing, and the teachers are saying, oh, look at his writing. When every time we bring out the journal, he's under the table and behind the bookshelf. And it's because if they cannot speak in sentences or sign, communicate in sentences, they are not going to be able to write in sentences. So when you don't have kids writing, back up and work at the oral level. Other strategies for when they're getting a little bit more complex is to teach them how to make complex sentences with some of these words. And an acronym I found out about recently was fanboys. Every letter in fanboy stands for a word, for, and, nor, but. So many of these kids, we want to learn to make sentences verbally, or they might sign using some of these words, teaching them to make complex sentences, because if you can do it verbally, you're going to be able to read them and comprehend them. So the ability to do it verbally or to sign it is going to occur before the ability to write it. And it helps comprehension as well when they're reading.
I love barrier games. I use them with every student. So a barrier game, the traditional one is Battleship. Guess who is also a barrier game? The idea is you have a barrier between the two students or yourself and the student so they can't see, but you're trying to make the same picture. So it really gets kids to listen to the other person. They really have to work on their sentence structure and be specific. If they don't tell a specific color or size, their pictures don't match. When you've done creating the scene or coloring the picture, however you're working on it, you remove the barrier, and they now have this visual support to see how well they communicated. Kids love it, and I've had great success as we generalize back into the classroom of those students that are now asking the teacher questions, specific questions. They know when they're not hearing things properly, they know when they're not understanding, and they're then able to formulate that question. It works really well for comprehension. You can use it with narratives. There's lots online about barrier games. And language of the curriculum. So if we put them into our chart, you can see barrier games does give you that bang for your buck, working across comprehension, accuracy, fluency, and vocabulary. And then if you need more targeted work on vocabulary, colorful semantics would also support those students. So the next ring on our donut, we're actually doing great for time. We might have time for questions, is semantics. So that's the meaning of words and the meaning of sentences. And we look at that, it's still continuing that vocabulary building. One example of a great resource is Bridging Words to Life. It has great ideas. It's got a lot of the research in it. It talks about read-alouds, reading and writing activities, and the importance of teacher modeling for that vocabulary. I feel like a lot of us are already doing this teacher modeling, and we're just trying to emphasize the importance of doing it intentionally. Beck and McCowan wrote their paper in 2002, and they talk about Tier 2 vocabulary words, and that was a term that was used for a while in many districts. So that's the idea of taking words that students don't naturally use in their language every day and teaching it to them. So it would be words like delectable, disgusting, something just one higher than what they might actually use. So instead of working on happy and sad, we work on like frustrated, angry, teaching them just a bit above. And another great strategy is PWIM because of the visual support. This stands for Picture Word Induction Model, and on the electronic handout that we sent to you, we have some links where you can gather some more information and videos to show you how to work on this strategy if you need. It's great to use for a student that needs that vocabulary support, that building. You can take whatever they're working on in class, be it a picture of their textbook, a picture of the field trip, and help them shake out the vocabulary, and then help them put it into an oral sentence or a written sentence as well. The great thing about using this within a classroom setting is if the teacher keeps the picture on the wall, we now have a visual dictionary for all students to access for the entire year. And as Pam said, it helps their writing because they have access to the words, so they're able to get their ideas down and not focus on that decoding piece.
Okay, and this is one of my favorites. It's just a visual support that I made in the Abbotsford School District with a bunch of my SLP colleagues. And when you're teaching new vocabulary words, to say, oh, what's your new vocabulary word? This word is called salmon. What category does salmon belong to? It belongs to the category called animals. What color is it? Where does it live? What does a salmon go with? Where do we find them? We're just trying to make all these connections between a vocabulary word so that when they're talking, they're much more apt to be able to remember that word. And it's going to increase their comprehension of the word. You know those kids we talk to where, yeah, you know that thing, and it swims in the water, and we get those really unspecific words. For kids that need to learn new vocabulary words, this really helps to anchor it. And I find one of my groups of teachers that love it the most are my English as a second language teachers, because they can talk to the teacher about, oh, what are you going to do in science next week? What are you going to do in social studies next week? And they can pre-teach some of the vocabulary, and then when the teacher is teaching the lesson, these are the kids putting up their hand and answering their questions, and they know, and it lets the kids feel really, really successful in the classroom because they've already had a little bit of practice with the vocabulary. So that's like an excellent strategy for how this could be used. Yeah, but some of those kids just need more practice with vocabulary words. Okay, and another strategy is the language processing hierarchy by Gail Richards.
So this gives you a hierarchy of, when you're looking at vocabulary, how children naturally develop vocabulary. So they start with labels, and when we think about a toddler, the first thing they would say is car, dog, cookie. Pam gave you the answers. The next step is functions. So the next thing that a typically developing toddler will start using is eat, cookie, go, car, pet, dog. So that's the same, our brains are wired to learn in that way, and so that's the same way that we want to be teaching our students. If they're struggling with functions, WH questions are going to be so difficult for them. They need that function knowledge to be able to answer those WH questions. The next one we go into is associations. Students that break down at this level tend to really struggle with associating letters to sounds. So when I get a referral from a teacher going, oh, they can't, when I show them letter A, they're not saying ah, I will often look back at this oral language piece and find a breakdown there. They're not able to associate that the picture of a cat means cat. So if we're teaching them something abstract as letters, it's going to be that much more difficult on their brain. Okay, then we go into categories. Students that are struggling with basic categories struggle with main idea in reading comprehension and expressing the main idea. Basic categories can be tricky. They can be masked. In preschool, they spend a lot of time on basic categories, like what do you eat? What are some animals? So a lot of kids learn those, and they will learn 3. We often teach them 3. So if you ask a student that's struggling to give you 4 or 5 in that category, you'll notice that they really are struggling with it and can't get past 3. So if you're trying to kind of determine if your student's struggling in this area or not, ask them for a few more in that category and see what they're able to generate for you. The next step would be teaching them attributes. So you can see how if they don't have the functions or the categories or associations, how writing and talking about attributes is going to be that much harder for them. And then we have non-traditional categories, so those would be like things that are sticky. I can't think of any other at the moment. Things that are red, not those basic categories. And then we get into the complex language of similarities, differences, synonyms, and antonyms. So I go into classrooms a lot, or I see students a lot, and the best intention is they're using a graphic organizer, and they're trying to identify same and different, but my student can't identify function. So you can see where that breakdown is happening for these students, and they do need a bit more focused teaching at their level. And then we get into idioms and multiple meanings, which are very rare for me to teach with a student. I don't always get there. And the last one being analogies. So that's just kind of a hierarchy that you can follow when you're working with a student on vocabulary, not jumping right to same and different, but making sure that you get the bottom levels. And generally, this is built as a house. So reading, writing, and reading comprehension would be one side of the house. And then the next, problem solving and reasoning, is the second side of the house. And the reason why they're the roof of the house, is that we're constantly working on them through all the other levels. So all those strategies we just talked to you about, the picture word induction model, tier 2 vocabulary words, would fall under that expanding vocabulary.
Okay, and then one of the final rings of our donut is pragmatic language skills, and those are our social language skills and understanding how people interact and have conversations and use body language and use facial expression. That social language piece is so hard for so many of our kids. When language isn't literal, then you need to read between the lines. That's really part of what reading comprehension is. And reading comprehension requires really good social language skills. Sometimes you notice the kids that hate fiction, they'll only read nonfiction. Well, sometimes that's because they really don't understand the nuance of the social piece of fiction. So my example here at the bottom of the page is, did you take my pen? The principal bellowed. No, 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 stammered Johnny, while his eyes darted nervously around. So how does the principal feel? What does the principal think about Johnny? Does he think Johnny took his pen? And what do you think of Johnny's response? Is he guilty or not guilty? We know so much about tone of voice, and we know so much about body language that we read this and we infer all this information and nobody is telling us. And for kids that have difficulty with social language, they would read this and it's like, does the principal think Johnny took his pen? No, otherwise he wouldn't be asking him. Did Johnny take it? No, he said no. So when you don't comprehend that social piece, it really influences your reading comprehension, especially for fiction. And a strategy is comic strip conversations. So while you're reading fiction like this, you can draw what's in the principal's thought bubble and what's in Johnny's thought bubble. And you'll notice that comic strip conversations, the author is Carol Gray, and she is our author of the original social stories. But more and more what they're finding is for so many of our kids, social stories is too much language, and social stories doesn't tell the kids the other people's thoughts and feelings. And so drawing a quick little comic and putting the words in the speech bubble and the other person's thoughts in the thought bubble is just a way of taking something really abstract and making it a little bit more concrete for the student. And social behavior mapping, again, just takes abstract concepts that we assume kids learn from their environment, and it makes them more concrete. It just writes down that when you behave this way, this is how the teacher feels, this is your experience, and it goes to that expected, unexpected behavior. And it's just trying to help students understand those unwritten social rules. The other example there of a consequence map, we have so many kids that don't understand cause-effect, and when I go to look for them after recess, they're in the principal's office, and you say, oh, why are you here? Because the principal is mean, because the teacher is mean, and they have no concept that being sent to the office is related to their behavior. So just drawing a simple consequence map like this one on the right freehand is showing them this is how you felt, this was the behavior that you chose, and this is how that consequence is linked to that behavior. Because so many of these kids don't have that piece. So it's a way to begin to take something really abstract like cause-effect thinking and make it concrete for them. There. And when you're working on your social language skills, sorry, it's yellow and harder to see here, but it's really going to help reading comprehension, and it's going to expand their vocabulary.
So we've gone through all the circles in our donut, and we're bringing it all together with narratives. It's a huge part of the new curriculum, and a lot of our students are struggling with it. So when you work on all the rings of the donuts, it's all going to, I'm having word finding today, it's all going to accumulate into narratives. One of our favorite ones that we recommend is Story Champs. The great thing about Story Champs is all the pictures come prepared, the stories come prepared. You don't have to pre-read the story and figure out where you're going to show them the visual support or teach the idea. It's also differentiated. So you could use it with a whole class. Those students that need more support, they'll start at a lower level, and those students that are more advanced will get a harder level where they're incorporating more story elements into it. And as Pam reminded me, it's evidence-based. So if we add narratives into our cafe model, you're getting a good bang for your buck using those. So there's a few strategies we recommended today that will really benefit students across the board with their literacy instruction and help them access the curriculum. So Homer likes to remind you, when you're struggling, you're not sure with the student, just back on up, work on some oral language, be giving them good support. And to end, are these on the handout? These are on the handout as well. These are some really good websites that we like to go to if you need some more information. The one on the literacy how, you can click on the little links in the circle, and it'll give you more information. 5 for 5 is great for reading from Australia. Spelfabit.com.au is a website and a program designed by an SLP. There's a part in her website where you can hit the picture and it'll pronounce the sounds for you. So if a student needs extra practice hearing them or a teacher's not really sure how they're going to pronounce that sound, you can use that resource. And then Ontario has put out their own Foundations for Literacy booklet. It's got great resources, toolkit for teachers. The very last one, I wonder if I can pull it up. Oh, I've got it on the laptop. Okay, well, it pulled up on the laptop, but it won't pull up on there. teachspeced.ca. If you go to this website and you click on the top banner, you can choose any sort of condition, acquired brain injury, Angelman syndrome. You can look at a student's needs, if they have central auditory processing, disengagement motivation strategies, eating disorder strategies. You can look at if they have a diagnosis, like learning disability or language impairment. You click on that, and it gives you some great strategies right off the bat. These are general whole class strategies that you could pass on to a teacher to help include the student in the classroom more. At the bottom of each page are more resources for people to access as well. So it's a great website to pass on to other staff, parents, teachers, just to educate them a bit more on students' needs.
And that's our last page. So I know it was a lot of information thrown at you all at once, and each ring of the donut is its own workshop where you can delve into more information, and instead we're just kind of blasting you with it. But it's a place to start, and 2 big ideas today. One is when a child is having difficulty with reading, with writing, with reading comprehension, back up and work on language development. All the rings of the donut. And our second big idea message is collaborate. Collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. Talk to your SLP, talk to your psychologist, talk to the classroom teacher. the more closely that we can work with the teacher, with all the professionals in the building, the better the educational experience for the student, the better the outcomes for the student. If you're not really comfortable working in the classroom, hopefully you have an idea of 1 or 2 places where you could start and poke your toe into the classroom. And yeah, I'm really happy to have the opportunity to talk to you all. So thank you.
I agree, thanks.
So I think that was an invitation that I can invite you back next year. Was that the, and then as you're saying, they did cover so much information, but I think sometimes we need that foundation, and then maybe we can zone in on one of those categories next year. So excellent. On the evaluation form, I asked, you know, are people interested in like, and not like a Facebook page or an Instagram, but I wanted to just mention, I got that idea kind of, Pam has, we're all in this together, a Facebook post, and it's inspirational, and sometimes, you know, it ranges from whether it's SLP information or just inspirational. So check her out on Facebook. We're all in this together. So thanks very much, ladies.